The sound hit first, a sharp thud behind us, then the jolt that shoved my shoulders forward. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself, but the cry from the back seat cut through everything. It wasn't a whimper. It was a raw, shaking scream that came from somewhere deep in her tiny chest. I turned, reached back, and saw her fists flailing in the straps. Before I could react, Laurel lunged across me, fingers hooking under the harness buckle, like she had any right to take control. "Don't," I said. My voice came out flat, harder than I meant, but her hand kept tugging at the clip. I pushed her wrist away. "Leave her in the seat." She shot me a look like I'd slapped her, but the only thing I cared about was the way my daughter's breath kept hitching in short, terrified bursts. The metal around us was still ticking from the impact. I tried to soothe her with my voice, keeping my hands close but steady, knowing that a quick pull, the wrong angle, could turn fear into something irreversible. Laurel muttered something under her breath. I didn't answer. My baby cried harder, and I focused on that tiny face, on the way her mouth trembled as she searched for me. When the sirens came closer, Laurel folded her arms tight. "You should have held her," she said. Quiet, but laced with judgment she didn't bother to hide. The sound of approaching boots filled the air. The paramedic leaned into the back seat, his flashlight sweeping over the straps, the buckles, the small trembling legs. I stepped aside so he could do his job. Laurel didn't move. She stood there with her jaw tight, eyes fixed on me as if I had done something unspeakable instead of following the exact thing every emergency guide tells you to do. My daughter's cries softened when she heard the new voice, her breath still choppy but no longer wild. The medic nodded. "Good call keeping her in. We'll lift her out in one motion." His tone was calm, practiced. Laurel shifted her weight like she wanted to interrupt, but she didn't. 2 more paramedics arrived, and together they lifted my baby with such precise care that even the air around them seemed to hold still. I watched every move, my nails pressing into my palms as they guided her onto the stretcher. Laurel exhaled loudly. "I would have held her," she said. The words fell between us, sharp and careless. I didn't respond. The adrenaline, the fear, the responsibility, it all sat heavy in my chest. The flashing lights reflected off the broken glass on the road. My daughter let out a soft, confused whimper as the paramedics rolled her toward the ambulance. I followed close, refusing to let any distance grow between us. Behind me, Laurel muttered again. "Some mothers have instincts. Some just don't." Her voice scraped at something inside me, but there wasn't space yet to let it strike. A nurse guided me into a narrow hallway lit by soft yellow bulbs. The quiet inside the hospital felt unreal after the chaos outside. My daughter lay in a small crib bed, her eyes heavy, her breath steadier now. I kept one hand on her blanket, letting her know I was near. Every few seconds she made a tiny sound, a leftover tremor from the shock. Laurel walked in behind me, her steps sharp on the linoleum. She didn't look at my baby, she looked at me. "You froze back there," she said. No hesitation. No softness. "She was screaming, and you just left her strapped in like she wasn't hurting." I swallowed hard. "It was safer that way." She scoffed. "Safe? That's what you're calling it?" A monitor beeped gently beside us. I kept my palm on my daughter's blanket, tracing the small rise and fall under the fabric. "If she had a spinal injury—" "You're hiding behind medical excuses," she cut in. "Any good mother would have held her." The nurse glanced over but didn't step in. Laurel wasn't yelling. She didn't need volume. She had precision. She aimed every word like she wanted them to bruise. My throat tightened. The crash, the crying, the fear. It was all still sitting raw under my skin. "Laurel, stop." She leaned closer. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking." A soft whimper came from the crib. I turned toward it, choosing my child over her accusation. Behind me, I heard Laurel's breath hitch in annoyance, a quiet, sharp sound that filled the space like a challenge. A doctor stepped in, clipboard tucked under his arm, his presence steady enough to settle the room for a moment. He checked my daughter with practiced movements, gentle but thorough. I watched every touch, every shift of his fingers, waiting for any sign of discomfort on her tiny face. When she stayed calm, a slow breath left my chest. "She's looking good," he said. "We'll run one more scan, but so far, no signs of injury." Relief flickered through me like a small flame. Before it could grow, Laurel let out a short, dismissive sigh. "See, she's fine. And you could have held her." The doctor paused. "Ma'am, keeping an infant in place after a crash is often the safest option." Laurel shrugged. "I still think she needed her mother more than some strap." I felt something inside me pull tight. Not anger yet, just a stretch, like a seam being tested. "Laurel, this isn't the time." She stepped closer. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the tile. "No, this is exactly the time." She was terrified. "You just sat there." My fingers tightened around the crib rail. "I was thinking about her spine." She tilted her head. "Or maybe you were just thinking about yourself." Those words hit harder than the crash, not because they were true, but because they came from someone I once trusted to stand beside me, not over me. A nurse walked by, the cartwheels humming across the floor, breaking the silence for only a second. Laurel didn't take her eyes off me. "You can justify it however you want," she said, "but a child needs to be held." My daughter shifted slightly in her crib, her lips parting in a small, tired sigh. That soft sound brushed against the rawest part of me. The waiting room felt too bright, too open, like every emotion I tried to keep steady was suddenly exposed under fluorescent light. I took a seat in the corner, close enough to hear if my daughter needed me. Laurel sat across from me, legs crossed, arms folded tight across her chest. Her eyes were sharp, restless, waiting for another opening to strike. A vending machine clattered somewhere near the wall. Laurel didn't look away from me. "You know," she began, her voice low but edged, "some women just aren't built for motherhood." The words slid across the room with a quiet cruelty that didn't need to be loud. I felt them land, heavy and undeserved. My hands tightened around the blanket draped across my lap. "Laurel, stop!" She leaned forward. "I watched you sit there while she screamed. I watched you do nothing." "I didn't do nothing," I said. "I protected her spine." She rolled her eyes. Always the dramatic reasoning. A couple walked in with a toddler, the child humming softly as the mother held him close. Laurel flicked her gaze toward them. "See that? That's what comfort looks like." My jaw stiffened. "You don't get to weaponize other people's love against me." Her mouth twisted. "If you'd just admit you handled it wrong." "I won't lie to make you feel right," I said. The words came out steadier than I felt. She let out a thin breath, almost a laugh. Unbelievable. A nurse called a name down the hall. A door clicked open. Somewhere deeper in the unit, a child cried out and was soothed immediately by a soft voice. The room hummed with quiet life. But between Laurel and me, the tension sat like a wall. She tapped her foot once against the floor. "You know what? Maybe this is just who you are. Cold, calculated." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Each word had weight, aimed with intention. My chest tightened, not from doubt, but from the sting of being misread so deeply by someone I once believed could understand me. The hallway outside radiology was quieter, a long stretch of muted colors and soft echoes. I stood beside the wall while a technician wheeled my daughter toward the imaging room. She watched the ceiling lights pass above her, eyes wide but calmer now, her tiny fingers curling around the edge of her blanket. I whispered to her that I was right here, that I wasn't going anywhere. Laurel followed a few steps behind, her pace slow, deliberate. When the door closed behind the technician, she spoke without looking at me. "You made everything harder than it had to be." I turned toward her. "Laurel, enough." She finally met my eyes. "No, because I'm the only one willing to tell you the truth." Her voice wasn't sharp this time. It was colder, steadier. You're too rigid, too obsessed with doing everything by the book. Babies need warmth, not rules. I felt the words press against something raw inside me. Warmth isn't the same as recklessness. She lifted a brow. Oh, please. It wasn't a house fire. You could have taken her out for 2 seconds. That's not how spinal injuries work. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. Or maybe that's just your excuse. Maybe you were too scared to actually pick her up. The remark hit different, not louder, just deeper. A small, sharp slice of judgment delivered with precision. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. You don't know what you're talking about. Her jaw clenched. I know what I saw. A nurse walked past with a clipboard tucked under her arm, offering a polite smile before continuing down the hall. Laurel's gaze flicked toward her, then back to me, as if gathering fuel. You know, she said quietly, some people try so hard to look like good mothers that they forget to actually be one. Something inside me pulled taut, a thin thread stretched to its limit. I felt the sting, not because her words were true, but because they came from someone who had never once held responsibility for a life that small and fragile. The door opened, and the technician waved me in. I stepped forward, brushing past Laurel without touching her, without giving her another inch of space to wound me. The technician dimmed the lights as the machine hummed to life. My daughter lay on the narrow table, her tiny body cradled in soft padding, her eyes drifting between the moving lights and my face. I kept my hand near hers, close enough for her to see, close enough for her to know she wasn't alone. When the scan ended, the room felt strangely colder. I lifted her gently when the technician allowed it, pressing her against my chest, breathing in that faint, familiar scent of milk and baby soap. Her fingers curled into my shirt, anchoring both of us. Laurel waited in the hallway with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. As soon as she saw me holding my daughter, she exhaled sharply. So now you can touch her. I held my daughter a little tighter. Laurel, stop, please. She shook her head. I'm not wrong. You panicked earlier. You didn't trust yourself, and your baby paid for it. I felt a slow burn rise in my chest. She didn't pay for anything. She's safe. Laurel's voice dropped into something brittle. Safe doesn't mean comforted. A man pushing a supply cart passed between us, the wheels clicking softly on the tile. When he moved on, Laurel stepped closer, close enough that I could see the tension in her jaw. You think you're so composed, she said, so prepared, but you froze when it really mattered. I saw it. I adjusted my daughter in my arms as she let out a small sigh, resting her head against my shoulder. You saw fear, I said quietly, not failure. Laurel's eyes flickered, annoyance, disbelief, something else she tried to hide. You always have an explanation ready. Don't you ever admit you're wrong? I won't apologize for protecting her. She scoffed. Right, because you're the expert now. My daughter shifted slightly, her cheek brushing my collarbone, grounding me in a way no argument ever could. Laurel's gaze lingered on the scene, a mother holding her child, and something tight crossed her face, sharp and fast, like a shadow she didn't want anyone to notice. We were moved to a quieter bay while we waited for the final results. A curtain separated us from the rest of the unit, muffling the steady chorus of beeps and soft voices. I sat in the chair beside the small hospital crib, my daughter finally asleep against my chest, her breath warm and slow. The weight of her felt like the first real moment of calm since the crash. Laurel stood near the foot of the crib, pretending to check her phone, her movements clipped and restless. She kept glancing at me, like her irritation needed somewhere to land. You know, she said suddenly, I don't understand how you stayed so still during all that. It's like you shut down. I stroked my daughter's back with my fingertips. I stayed focused. That's not focus, she said. That's detachment. The word stung because she meant it as an accusation, not an observation. "You weren't the one responsible for making the safest choice," I replied softly. Laurel lowered her phone. "And you weren't the one trying to stop a child from screaming herself hoarse." A nurse walked by the curtain and paused to check the monitor. She offered a small smile before leaving again. Laurel waited until she was gone. "You know what bothers me the most?" she asked. "You acted like my help was dangerous." I looked up at her. Because it was. Her eyebrows shot up. I was trying to comfort her. "You were tugging at her harness after a collision," I said. That could have hurt her. Laurel's lips tightened. "A real mother would have held her. You let her suffer." The words hit harder than she expected, hard enough that she blinked, surprised she'd said them aloud. I felt something inside me shift, an old bruise pressed under a new weight. Before I could speak, my daughter stirred in her sleep, her fingers curling gently into the fabric of my shirt. That small motion pulled every scattered emotion back into place. Laurel watched the movement, watched the quiet bond she kept trying to question. Behind her irritation, something flickered again, small, fleeting, but unmistakably rooted in her own ache. A volunteer wheeled a cart of blankets past the bay, the soft rustle of fabric brushing against the curtain. My daughter shifted again, her head nestling deeper into my chest. I rocked her gently, slow and steady, matching the rhythm of her breathing. The warmth of her small body softened the last of the adrenaline still lingering in my system. Laurel leaned against the wall, arms folded, her expression tense, but strangely distant. "You know," she said, "I've seen mothers who panic more over a scraped knee. But you? You barely flinched." I kept my gaze on my daughter. "I didn't have the luxury of panic." She scoffed. "There you go again with the hero mom act." "It's not an act," I said. "It's responsibility." She shifted her weight. "You sound so sure of yourself." I didn't answer. The curtain moved as someone walked by, the faint draft brushing across the room. Laurel let out a slow breath, almost shaky, though she tried to steady it. "You made me feel useless," she said quietly, like the words slipped out before she could catch them. I glanced at her. I wasn't trying to. "You pushed my hand away like I didn't matter, like I wasn't capable of doing anything right." "That's not what happened." Her jaw tightened. "It's how it felt." I adjusted my daughter again, keeping her secure in the crook of my arm. "Laurel, this wasn't about you. It was about her safety." She let out a dry laugh. "You always have an answer, don't you?" "You always turn everything personal," I replied softly. She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her face flickered, a brief collapse of the sharpness she kept clinging to. "You don't get it," she whispered. "You don't know what it's like to want something so much and not be able to have it." The words hung there, fragile and trembling. I felt the shift, sudden and sharp, the kind of truth that cracks open a deeper layer beneath all the noise. But before I could respond, she straightened her posture, hiding whatever had surfaced. "Forget it," she muttered. "You wouldn't understand." The baby let out a soft, sleepy hum against my shoulder. I rested my cheek gently on her head, anchoring myself. Across from me, Laurel's eyes carried a storm she didn't want to admit was there. The doctor returned with a stack of papers in his hand, his expression calm, steady. The kind of look that lets the world exhale. "Good news," he said. "Your daughter's scans are clear. No fractures, no swelling." Relief washed through me so quickly it almost hurt. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight lift. When I opened them, my daughter blinked up at me, peaceful now, her tiny fingers curling against my collar. Laurel didn't smile. She didn't soften. She stared at the doctor, then at me, then at the floor, like she wasn't sure which direction to aim her reaction. "That's good," she said finally. The words came out thin, barely shaped. The doctor nodded and left us to process the news. I kissed my daughter's forehead, breathing in the warm quiet of her safety. For the first time since the crash, my shoulders stopped tightening around my ribs. Laurel pulled her chair closer, but her movements were stiff. "I'm glad she's okay," she said. "Really, She stopped. Her throat bobbed once like she wanted to say more, but couldn't form the shape of it. I waited. I didn't push. She exhaled, long and uneven. It just looked wrong. Seeing her cry like that and not being held. "She was scared," I said softly. "But fear and danger aren't the same thing." Laurel's eyes flicked up. "Maybe not for you." The curtain swayed slightly as a draft passed through the hallway. I shifted my daughter higher on my shoulder, her breath warm on my neck. "Laurel," I said, "I know you were trying to help. I do. But in that moment, what you wanted to do and what was safe weren't the same." Her face tightened, not with anger this time, but with something closer to hurt. "You made me feel like I had no right to care." "You do care," I said, "but caring doesn't make every instinct the right one." Her grip tightened around the strap of her purse. "You don't have to talk to me like I'm fragile." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm talking to you like someone who loves my child too much to take risks." She blinked, startled by the honesty, maybe even disarmed by it. Then something darker crossed her face, a shadow that wasn't aimed at me, but at something deeper inside her. "I would have held her," she whispered, "because I know what it's like to not get the chance." Her voice cracked on the last word, so soft it barely reached me. I felt the room shift, the quiet kind of shift that reveals the real source of someone's fury, someone's judgment, someone's sharpness. It wasn't me. It was the absence in her life she couldn't control. A transport aide arrived with a wheelchair, ready to move us to discharge. My daughter stirred against me, blinking sleepily as I adjusted her blanket. The soft fabric brushed her cheek, and she let out a tiny sigh that loosened something deep inside my chest. Laurel stood a few feet away, her posture pulled tight, as if she wanted to step closer but didn't trust herself to. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. "You know," she said, voice low, "I wasn't trying to make things worse. I just reacted." "I know you did," I replied. She looked at the floor. "It felt like you pushed me out, like you were telling me I didn't matter." I shifted my daughter to my other arm. In that moment, nothing mattered except doing what was safest for her. It wasn't about shutting you out. Her jaw tightened, but it felt like it. A nurse walked in with discharge papers, placing them on a rolling table beside me. Laurel stepped back, giving space she hadn't given all day. The pen clicked softly as the nurse wrote, the only sound between us for a few seconds. Laurel glanced at my daughter, then at the small hand curled tightly into my shirt. Something in her face faltered. "You get to hold her every day," she whispered. "You get to hear her cry and know she wants you. You get to be the person she reaches for." I looked at her, understanding finally landing in a way it hadn't before. Laurel wasn't angry at my choices. She was grieving her lack of them. "I wasn't judging you," she said, but her voice betrayed her. "I was jealous, and I hate that." My daughter let out a soft coo, completely unaware of the storm that had been swirling around her. I brushed my thumb over her back. "Laurel," I said gently, "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I couldn't risk hurting her either." She swallowed hard, eyes glistening for the first time all day. I know that. Sometimes it feels like I'm standing outside a life I can't reach." The curtain shifted as someone walked by, scattering the moment. I took a slow breath. "Then say that, not the things you said earlier." She looked away, shame tightening her shoulders. "I didn't mean half of it." "But you said all of it." A single tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, embarrassed to be seen breaking. My daughter's tiny fingers curled again, anchoring me. Across from me, Laurel stood with empty hands. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. The soft ding of each passing floor echoed in the quiet space, broken only by the faint rustle of my daughter's blanket as she shifted against me. Her tiny body was warm and relaxed now, her cheek pressed to my collarbone. The contrast between this peace and the chaos hours earlier made the silence feel almost unreal. Laurel stood in the opposite corner of the elevator, hugging her arms against her chest. Her eyes stayed fixed on the closed doors, like she couldn't bear to look anywhere else. When we reached the lobby, she walked a step ahead, but her pace slowed, as if she wasn't sure whether to leave or wait. The automatic doors slid open, letting in a breath of cool night air. The parking lot lights cast soft circles across the pavement. I adjusted my hold on my daughter as we stepped outside. Laurel stopped near the curb. "I shouldn't have said those things," she said, her voice fragile, stripped of everything sharp. "I know that." I nodded but didn't fill the space for her. She swallowed. "When you told me to yank my own kid out when I have one," her voice cracked, "it hit deeper than you think." "I didn't know," I said quietly. "I didn't know that would hurt you like that." Her eyes glistened under the streetlights. "Of course you didn't. How could you? I never talk about it. I never talk about any of it. And when I saw you with her, scared but still so connected to her," she let out a breath that wasn't steady. "It made me feel like the universe handed you something I've been begging for." My daughter stirred in my arms, a tiny sleepy sound. Laurel wiped her cheek quickly. "I wasn't angry at you. I was angry at myself, at my body, at everything I can't change." I exhaled slow and steady. "But you aimed it at me." "I know," she whispered, "and I'm sorry. I said cruel things. I shouldn't have." A car passed in the distance, its headlights sweeping across the lot. Laurel stared down at her hands, twisting her fingers together like she needed something to hold. "I don't hate you," she said. "I just hate feeling left behind." I shifted my daughter closer, brushing my chin against her soft hair. "Laurel, I care about you, but today, you crossed lines that hurt." She closed her eyes, nodding once as if bracing herself. "I know," she said. "And I don't expect you to forget it." Her voice trembled with a truth she couldn't hide anymore, the kind that didn't come from anger, but from a place much more hollow and tender. The night air carried a faint chill as we crossed the parking lot, the kind that settles quietly around your skin without fully sinking in. I held my daughter close, her tiny breaths warm against the side of my neck. Laurel walked a step behind me, her silence stretched thin, no longer sharp, just tired. When we reached my car, she stopped beside the passenger door. "I don't expect you to forgive me tonight," she said softly. "I just needed you to know why I acted the way I did." I opened the back door carefully, lowering my daughter into her car seat with slow, practiced movements. She blinked up at me, calm now, her fingers brushing the edge of her blanket as if she recognized the familiarity of her little space. I checked every buckle twice before closing the door. Laurel watched me the entire time. "You're good with her," she whispered. "You really are." I didn't answer right away. I leaned against the car, letting the weight of the day settle across my shoulders. "I know you were hurting," I said, "but today, the way you spoke to me, it wasn't fair." She looked down, kicking lightly at a loose pebble on the pavement. "I know. I kept pushing because I didn't want to sit with my own feelings. Picking at you was easier." "That doesn't make it okay." She nodded. "I didn't think you'd ever see the cracks in me. I didn't want you to." I inhaled slowly. I saw them today, all of them. Laurel's lip trembled almost imperceptibly. "I wanted to help her," she said. "I wanted to feel like I mattered in that moment, and when you pushed my hand away, it reminded me that I don't get to be that person, not with anyone." Her voice cracked at the end, thin and breaking. I stepped closer, not enough to bridge the distance entirely, but enough to soften it. "You matter," I said quietly. Just not in the way you were trying to force. She wiped at her eyes again, embarrassed by her own unraveling. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything I said, for making today harder, for making my pain your problem. I looked at her for a long moment. The anger I'd felt earlier had cooled, replaced by something gentler, something that understood grief without needing to excuse it. You're my friend, I said. But friendship can't survive if cruelty becomes the language. Laurel pressed her lips together, nodding slowly as if each acknowledgement cost her something. I'll do better, she said. I want to do better. My daughter let out a tiny sigh from inside the car, a soft reminder of what had mattered most all along. Laurel heard it too. The sound made her shoulders drop as if the fight inside her had finally run out of places to go. Laurel lingered beside the car, her arms wrapped around herself as if the night had finally settled against her skin. The parking lot was quiet except for the low hum of a distant engine and the soft rustle of trees along the curb. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The space between us wasn't hostile anymore, just fragile, like something that had been cracked but not yet mended. I keep imagining, she began, then stopped, her voice catching. I keep imagining what it would feel like to have a little one reach for me the way she reaches for you. I let the words settle. They carried no accusation this time, only longing. Laurel, I said gently, I didn't know you were carrying all of this. She let out a breath that wasn't quite a sigh. I don't talk about it because talking makes it real, and if it's real, then so is the fact that it might never happen for me. Her eyes glistened again, but this time she didn't wipe the tears away. She let them sit there, shining under the streetlight. I wasn't trying to take your place, she whispered. I just wanted to feel needed, even if it wasn't mine to claim. The honesty softened something inside me. Wanting something doesn't make you a bad person, I said. But hurting someone to reach for it, that's where things went wrong today. She nodded, shame pulling at the corners of her expression. I know, and I hate that I let it come out like that. I leaned my back against the car, letting the cool metal steady me. We've both had a long day. She gave a small, shaky laugh. That's one way to put it. A breeze passed between us, lifting a few strands of her hair. She tucked them behind her ear again, a habit she fell back on whenever she didn't know what to do with her hands. I don't want this to be the end of our friendship, she said quietly, but I understand if you need space, or time, or whatever you need. I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who wasn't trying to win a fight anymore, someone who was finally standing in her truth, however painful it was. I don't want it to be the end either, I said, but things will have to change. She nodded, accepting it without protest. I can do that. I will do that. From inside the car, my daughter shifted, making a soft, sleepy chirp. Laurel turned toward the sound, and something gentle flickered across her face, bitter-sweet but undeniably genuine. You should get her home, she said quietly. I will. Laurel stepped back, giving me space. Thank you for hearing me, she added, even when I didn't deserve it. I offered a small nod. It was all I could give in that moment, and all she needed to understand. She took a slow breath, steadying herself before turning toward her own car, each step careful, as if she were learning how to walk without anger for the first time today. I opened the driver's door and settled into the seat, the faint click of metal on metal sounding louder in the quiet night. My daughter stirred again, her tiny fingers stretching before curling back into a loose fist. I reached back to touch her foot through the blanket, letting her know I was still here, still hers, still steady. Laurel hadn't gotten into her car yet. She stood by the open door, one hand braced on the frame, shoulders hunched, not from the cold, but from the weight of everything she had finally let slip through. The anger, the jealousy, the grief she'd been holding like a stone pressed to her ribs. She turned slightly, her voice barely rising above the hum of the parking lights. "You're a good mom," she said, "even today, especially today." The softness in her tone surprised me, not because she said it, but because she meant it. I met her eyes over the roof of my car. "And you're not the monster you think you are," I said quietly. "But you can't let pain speak for you, not like this." Her chin trembled just once. "I know." The moment held between us, small but real, a place where truth didn't need to be defended or softened, just acknowledged. She stepped back, giving a tentative, tired nod. "Get her home safe." "I will." She closed her door gently, almost reverently, like the noise might break the fragile truce we'd managed to build. I watched her pull out of the lot, her headlights sweeping across the pavement before fading into the night. For a moment, I sat in the stillness, listening to my daughter's soft breaths. Some days break you. Some days reveal who you still are beneath the break. Tonight had done both. I pulled onto the main road, the street lamps passing in slow intervals, each one casting a soft glow across my daughter's face in the rearview mirror. Her breathing stayed steady, her tiny chest rising and falling beneath the blanket. The sight of her safe, truly safe, pressed a warmth into my sternum that I didn't try to fight. The road stretched quiet ahead. The chaos of the evening felt distant now, like it had been wrapped in cotton. But the words, the ones Laurel threw at me, and the ones she finally admitted to, lingered in the air of the car. Some stung. Some explained more than they excused, and some I hadn't realized I needed to hear. At a red light, I glanced back at my daughter. Her face relaxed into that soft expression babies get when sleep has pulled them far beyond worry. I reached back, brushing my fingers against her blanket. "We're okay," I whispered. "We're going home." The light turned green. I drove on. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed in the cup holder. I waited until I reached a stop sign before checking the screen. A message from Laurel. "I'm sorry, truly. I hope you know I love her too, in my own messy way." I stared at the words for a moment, letting them settle. They weren't perfect, they weren't a fix, but they were real. I typed back one sentence. "We'll figure things out, but not tonight." I didn't send forgiveness. I didn't send anger. Just truth, the kind that didn't demand more than I could give. As I turned onto my street, the porch light glowed softly ahead, waiting. Home always had a way of pulling things back together, even when they came back frayed. I parked the car and unbuckled my daughter, lifting her into my arms, her body curled against mine. Trusting completely. I pressed a kiss to her temple, breathing in that warm, familiar scent. Some days test you. Some days teach you, and some days force you to see the hidden ache in someone else's sharp edges. Tonight had been all three. The house was dim and quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps itself around you after a long, bruising day. I nudged the door closed with my hip, careful not to jostle the little body curled against my chest. My daughter let out a tiny sigh, her cheek pressing deeper into my shoulder, as though she knew she was finally somewhere soft. I headed straight to her room. The night light cast a warm glow across the crib, the gentle curve of pale stars flickering on the wall. I laid her down slowly, letting her fingers slip free from the fabric of my shirt. Her hand twitched once before settling. Palm relaxed, her breathing even. I stood there for a moment, watching the calm I'd fought so hard to protect. The image of her earlier, the panic, the cries, the trembling, flashed through my mind like a bruise still fresh. My heart tightened, then settled. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, letting exhaustion hit me all at once. The crash, the hospital, the accusations, the apologies, it all washed over me in one long wave. My legs felt heavy, my chest felt full. The kitchen light flickered on with a soft click when I entered. I set my keys on the counter, the metal clinking against the wood. I poured a glass of water, but my hands were unsteady enough that the rim tapped the faucet before I caught hold. As I drank, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Laurel. I meant what I said. I'm not proud of myself, but I'm trying. I exhaled slowly. Trying. Not healed, not perfect, but trying. That counted for something. I typed back, "Rest. We'll talk soon. No promises, but no walls either." I walked into the living room, the soft pool of lamplight settling across the carpet. The space felt familiar again, safe again, mine again. Lowering myself onto the couch, I let my head fall back, eyes closing. The silence wrapped around me, not empty, but steady. A place to breathe. Today had taken something from me, but it had given something too, a truth I hadn't asked for, but one I finally understood. Not every wound looks like anger when it starts. Sometimes it looks like someone reaching too fast, too hard for something they fear they'll never hold. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is hold your own boundaries without letting them become walls. I woke sometime later. The room dim except for the steady glow from the hallway. My neck ached from the angle I'd fallen asleep in, but the quiet held me still for a moment. Heavy, grounding, almost tender. The day replayed in fragments behind my eyes, each one sharp enough to sting. I took a breath, letting the pieces settle into something less jagged. Then a soft sound drifted through the house, a small, sleepy whimper from the nursery. I pushed myself up and made my way down the hall, feet brushing the carpet in slow, careful steps. When I reached the crib, my daughter shifted under the warm light of the night lamp, her face scrunching before relaxing again. I placed a hand on her chest, letting her feel the familiar weight of me. Her breathing evened out almost immediately. "Okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "Mama's here." Her fingers curled toward the warmth of my palm, a simple instinct that sent a tight pull through my chest. I stood there longer than I planned, watching the small rise and fall of her breaths, the quiet miracle of her being safe. When I finally stepped back into the hallway, my phone buzzed once on the console table. One last message from Laurel. "I hope someday I can be okay with all this. I'm not yet, but I'm trying. Thank you for not giving up on me today." I stared at the message, feeling something steady settle inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a recognition of the truth between us. Pain doesn't excuse cruelty, but understanding doesn't erase it either. The middle ground was messy, fragile, real. I typed a short reply, "Rest. We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes." I set the phone face down. The house breathed around me. Quiet walls, warm air, the faint hum of the baby monitor. I walked to the window and looked out at the still street. The night felt calm for the first time in hours. Some friendships break in explosions. Some crumble slowly, and some bend, then reshape themselves around truths neither person meant to reveal. Tonight, ours bent. Whether it would hold, time would tell. But for now, the house was safe. My daughter was safe, and that was enough. Morning came in slowly, filtering through the curtains in soft strips of gold. I blinked awake on the couch, my back stiff, my thoughts still tangled in the remnants of yesterday. The house was quiet, too quiet, until a soft coo drifted from the baby monitor. I pushed myself upright and followed the sound down the hall. My daughter lay in her crib, blinking up at the ceiling as if greeting the day with no memory of the chaos before. When she saw me, her mouth curved into a tiny smile, the kind that melts every bruise the world tries to leave on you. I scooped her up, felt her warmth sink into my chest, and pressed a kiss to her soft hair. In the kitchen, the kettle clicked on. The simple domestic sound grounded me. I balanced her on my hip while preparing a bottle, her little hand tapping rhythmically against my arm. When she fed, her eyes drooped in that peaceful, trusting way babies have, the way that reminds you what matters. The phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Laurel. I hesitated before opening it. "Good morning. I know things are still heavy. I just want you to know, if you need space, I'll give it. I don't want my pain to spill on you anymore." I stared at the screen, then at my daughter's relaxed face. Space. Maybe that was the right word, not distance, not punishment, just room to breathe. I typed back slowly, choosing each word with care. We both need a little space, but I'm not closing the door. I just need time to settle after everything. I hit send. A moment later, thank you for not shutting me out completely. I set the phone aside. The sunlight warmed the kitchen tiles. My daughter finished her bottle and nestled against me, her tiny hand resting on my collar. This quiet morning light, this breathing room, this simple moment felt like the first step towards something steadier. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, just peace, enough to start again. The rest of the morning moved quietly, each moment unfolding with a steadiness I hadn't realized I needed. I dressed my daughter in a soft onesie, her legs kicking gently as I snapped each button. She laughed once, a small, breathy sound, and the tightness I'd carried since yesterday loosened in my chest. We settled into the living room. I laid her on her playmat, the soft rattle of her toy filling the air as she reached for it with clumsy fingers. Watching her explore the world so simply, so innocently, grounded me more than any deep breath ever could. My phone buzzed once, but I didn't check it. Not yet. Today didn't need to begin with another emotional conversation. Today needed to begin with her safety, her smile, her steady heartbeat against the quiet of the house. I made myself a cup of coffee, the aroma wrapping around the room like something warm and slow. I sipped it while watching her push the toy with her tiny foot. She was content. She was whole. She was here. A knock came at the door. I froze for half a second, not out of fear, but out of the unexpectedness of it. I picked up my daughter and walked toward the entryway, her head resting on my shoulder. When I opened the door, a small package sat on the doormat. No return address, no note, just my name written in Laurel's handwriting. I hesitated, then brought it inside and placed it on the table. My daughter babbled softly in my arms, as if urging me on. I opened the package carefully. Inside was a small stuffed rabbit, white, soft, clearly chosen with care. Beneath it lay a folded card, for her, because she deserves gentleness, and for you, because you deserved support, not judgment. I ran my fingers along the edge of the card, the weight of her words settling into me. Not heavy, just honest. The rabbit had long ears and a tiny stitched smile. I handed it gently to my daughter, who grabbed it with both hands, pressing her cheek against the soft fur. She cooed, delighted. And somehow, in that simple moment, the last remnants of yesterday's anger dissolved, fading into something quiet, something manageable. Not healed, not erased, but softened. The kind of soft that comes when someone tries, not perfectly, not instantly, but sincerely, to put back what they broke. I sat down beside my daughter, watching her explore the rabbit's ears with curious fingers. A long breath moved through me, steady and warm. Some days end in wreckage, some end in repair. Today felt like the first step toward the latter. The afternoon sun slanted through the living room window, a warm stripe of light falling across the carpet where my daughter now lay on her tummy. She pressed the rabbit's soft ear to her mouth, squealing quietly as if it were the most magical thing she had ever touched. Watching her like that, calm, delighted, whole, filled the room with a peace that had felt impossible just hours ago. I sat beside her, letting my fingers trace slow circles on her back. She glanced up at me, eyes wide and trusting, then went back to exploring the toy Laurel had sent. The gesture still sat on the table behind me, wrapped in that card with its uneven handwriting, an apology in cotton and ink. The phone buzzed again, this time with a longer vibration. Someone calling. I glanced at the screen. Laurel. I didn't answer. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. Just, not yet. A voicemail popped up seconds later. I waited until my daughter drifted into a soft hum of baby talk before pressing play. Her voice came through shakier than I'd ever heard it. I'm not calling to reopen anything, she said. I'm calling because yesterday scared me too. I didn't want to admit it. I tried to control something I had no right to control. I'm sorry. I hope the rabbit made her smile. That's all I wanted today. Just one small thing I could give. The message ended with a breath that wasn't quite steady. I put the phone down, letting the silence settle. My daughter rolled onto her back and held the rabbit above her, watching the ears flop from side to side. She laughed, bright and sudden. And just like that, the last corner of resentment loosened inside me. I wasn't ready to pick up every piece of our friendship, but I wasn't holding the broken parts like weapons anymore. I watched my daughter clutch the rabbit to her chest, her tiny fingers gripping it tight. That small motion felt like a bridge, a soft acceptance of what could be rebuilt. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You're okay," I whispered, "and we're going to be okay." She blinked up at me, eyes bright and certain, as if answering a question I hadn't said aloud. Some repairs begin with words, some begin with silence, and some begin with a gift small enough to fit in a child's hands. As the afternoon stretched on, the house settled into its gentle rhythm. My daughter napped in her crib, the stuffed rabbit tucked beneath her tiny arm. Every few minutes she let out a soft sigh, the kind that eased the last remnants of tension from my shoulders. I lingered in the doorway, just watching her breathe, letting the quiet become its own kind of healing. When I stepped back into the living room, the light had shifted, warm, amber, touching every surface with a softness that felt earned. I picked up Laurel's card again. The ink had smudged slightly at one corner, a small imperfection that made the whole thing feel more human, more sincere. I sat down on the couch and let the stillness wrap around me. The events of the previous night replayed, not as sharp flashes now, but as softened moments, rounded by understanding. The crash, the cries, the panic, the anger, the truth beneath it all. It no longer felt like an unraveling, more like a painful opening. The phone buzzed once, a new message from Laurel, no pressure to respond. I just wanted to say, "Thank you for being patient with me, even when I didn't deserve it. I'm working on myself. I hope one day I can be someone who lifts you up, not tears you down." I read it twice. Not to analyze it, not to react, just to sit with it. People break in different ways. Some break inward, quietly. Some break outward, sharp and messy. Laurel had done both, and I had been caught in the crossfire. But the truth was simple. Pain had spoken for her yesterday, not her heart, and growth never comes wrapped in perfect language. It arrives clumsily, through small attempts, crooked apologies, and the courage to say I'm trying. I typed one sentence back, "We'll take it slow." A pause. Then her reply, "That's more than I hoped for." I put the phone down and leaned into the couch, letting gratitude unwind inside me. Not for the chaos, but for the calm that followed it. Not every story of friendship survives a storm, but sometimes the storm shows who is willing to rebuild instead of walk away. Evening settled in slowly, painting the walls in deeper shades of gold as the sun dipped lower behind the houses across the street. I moved quietly through the kitchen, washing the last bottle of the day, letting the warm water run over my hands. My daughter dozed in her swing nearby, the rabbit resting against her cheek, its long ears rising and falling with the rhythm of her breath. The house felt full again, not of noise, but of something steadier, something that made the air softer. I dried my hands and stepped into the living room, sinking onto the rug beside my daughter. She stirred, blinking up at me with the unfocused sweetness only babies have. I brushed a fingertip across her tiny palm, and her fingers closed around mine without hesitation. That simple trust, instinctive, complete, hit me deeper than anything Laurel had said yesterday. "You're safe," I whispered. "You were always safe." Her eyes fluttered shut again. The rabbit pressed close to her cheek as if it belonged there. My gaze drifted to the card on the coffee table. I picked it up again, tracing the imperfect curved letters with my thumb. Imperfect, but honest. And honesty, even shaky, was its own kind of beginning. A soft knock at the door startled me. Not loud, almost tentative. I rose slowly, careful not to wake the little one, and opened it a crack. A small bag sat on the porch, no one in sight. Just the faint warmth of the evening breeze brushing past my legs. I lifted the bag and carried it inside. Inside were two things: a container of homemade soup and a note written in the same uneven handwriting as before. For you, because yesterday took more out of you than you let anyone see. Rest tonight. Let me carry a little of the weight, I added. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the quiet sincerity of it settle through me. This wasn't about fixing everything at once. It wasn't even about repairing the friendship fully. It was about effort, about choosing gentleness where there had been hurt, about showing up with something other than anger. I placed the soup in the fridge, feeling the warmth of the gesture more than the container itself. A shift, a beginning, a slow, careful step towards something better. I returned to the living room and knelt beside my daughter again. The rabbit's soft fur brushed her cheek as she slept, her tiny chest rising in its steady rhythm. Some wounds don't need to be reopened to be acknowledged. Some apologies don't need words spoken aloud. And some friendships don't need to return to what they were, only evolve into something gentler. Night settled fully outside, a quiet blue pressed against the windows as the house slipped into its final calm. I lifted my daughter from her swing, her warm little body curling instinctively into the crook of my arm. She was half asleep, heavy with that trusting softness unique to babies. The rabbit dangled from her hand, its small stitched smile brushing against my wrist. I carried her to the nursery, the room glowing gently under the nightlight. As I laid her in the crib, she tightened her grip on the rabbit's ear for a moment before letting it fall beside her. I watched her chest rise and fall, steady, unbothered, peaceful. A softness filled me. Relief, love, and something deeper. Something like gratitude for making it through a day that could have ended far worse. When I stepped back into the hallway, the house felt still enough to reflect my own thoughts. I walked to the kitchen, poured the soup Laurel had left into a small bowl, and warmed it on the stove. The smell, simple, comforting, filled the air. I leaned against the counter as the warmth rose from the bowl, wrapping around me like a quiet gesture of care. I sat at the table and took a spoonful. The flavor was gentle, familiar. It tasted like effort. It tasted like someone trying. When I finished, I rinsed the bowl, let the water run over my hands, and allowed myself a long moment to breathe. This was what healing looked like. Not dramatic, not loud, just small choices, small steps. Before turning off the kitchen light, I glanced once more at the card on the table. Rest tonight. Let me carry a little of the weight, I added. I exhaled, slow and steady. A weight had been added, and a weight had been lifted. I walked to the nursery door and stood there for a moment, listening to the soft murmur of my daughter's breath. The rabbit's long ears peeked up beside her, a quiet reminder of change. Not perfect, not complete, but genuine. Some endings aren't endings at all. Some are quiet transitions into the next version of a relationship, one built on truth instead of assumptions, on effort instead of pride. I closed the nursery door gently. Tonight, finally, the house, and my heart, felt still.